this dog we saw in the last exercise had some stress about moving over here where there's a gap between the two buildings going toward a busy street. And so here during exercise 3, what we're going to see is that this dog is exploring turning around more often than coming towards the treats. And this seems to provide some information about how valuable moving in this direction is. Now, one of the things that could have been done to maybe alter this is moving the treats over more to this side, maybe over there where they're standing now. So as we see her coming forward, we see the head coming down, we see the tail coming down, and turning away and getting the treats, we're actually seeing looser, slower body language, up ears, happy, prancy movement. And then coming back in this direction, that was a really good dog-led turnaround. Same thing, as she gets ahead here, this is an interesting piece that shows me that this is information. So she knows the treats are over here. She watched them get put in the bowl. But yet here she does a little turning around where she actually initiated it. So she came up here and she kind of faced in front of the handler, cutting her off. Which is a great way to stop that movement and guide around. Now coming back this way, we see her come ahead here, and we see her head's lowering, her ears are getting a little tensed and starting to come kind of back in on the side of her head, so we're getting a little bit of stress there. It can be very hard to see, and then as she reaches the end of the leash, she actually starts to guide the handler. I'm going to slow the speed down as much as I can here. And we're going to look at how she starts coming straight this way and then actually comes in front of the handler here. And we see her ears are back, and when we pause it at this frame, we can see some stressiness. And so this is where we want to contrast how they look coming towards what we think is the desired goal versus away from it. And so here we're seeing a little stress, and we saw her using that turning behavior. And there she gets the treat, and her ears come up and her tail comes up and her body loosens. And so, well, we may look at this and go, well, if we're turning them away from the thing they want, are we using negative punishment because we're removing something that they want access to? And if so, are we just giving them a consolation prize with the treat? Well, I say in the event that could happen, the best thing that we can do is to add a treat just in case. But we want to make sure that when we're adding treats that we're aware of what possible negative implications could happen. So adding food going in this direction could be compelling her to move in this way when she doesn't want to. And we already see that the bowl over here of food is just not quite enough, and it may be that we're not close enough to it yet. But turning away, we're seeing some stark differences in her body language, and that is the value of communication. That when they're given strategies that allow them to control what outcome they choose, they're going to choose the outcome that is most meaningful to them in that moment. And that may not be what we assume. And so we want to make sure that the options are maintained. There's no wrong answer here. It's very human and normal for us to want to bias towards getting here. This is our goal that we've set in our mind. We want to move closer to it. But really what we're trying to do in this exercise is practice listening to the dog and allowing the dog to express their preferences between two sort of contrasting options. Do you want to go in that direction or the opposite direction? You get to pick. You tell me. Either way, you get the same exciting outcome from it. You get food, whatever way you go. One is just the reward in getting closer to that designated food. It's okay, a little accidental treat there. It happens. But then again, after she eats the treat, we see her get a little nervous, head down. And so that moving ahead is what we call a precursor behavior. We're going to talk about that a little more in the upcoming units, but it's that first thing that happens before we start to see a whole lot more of the stressy behaviors. So moving ahead is a neutral, it's not bad or good option that allows us to see when we could be heading down a risky path. And so totally normal. I think it's going to be something that as you work through this, and I want to highlight this not as this handler was making a mistake, but this is a learning process for both you and your dog. There are going to be times when you are going to fall back into your learned habits as well. And the idea is not perfection, but it is trying to become more aware of maybe some of those things. So that's why I'm going to point them out here. Again, this was an accidental treat. It could add some unintentional pressure to move this way, but we're working in a really low stakes environment, so it's okay. And if you find yourself doing that, it's not a big deal. So again, she breaks free of the treat. We see those ears are coming back, head coming down. She licks her lip a little bit. It's really hard to see. And then she goes to turn, And when she turns, when the human starts to turn, we actually see those ears are coming up and forward. It's not just the treat, but it's also this response from the human. So let's take a look at that. So she's seeing that the human is turning and those ears are coming up as well. And so eventually we will start to really separate those out to get a better idea. But looking at the change in her body just going a different direction is really good information for us as well. And here, as she's starting to, in my opinion, become more confident that she can turn the human whenever she wants, that she actually has control, this is where we start to see them making choices that are unexpected or maybe contrast with that first choice that they were making. And so this is how choice creates change. So at first we might have been really tempted to keep turning away. We were stressed. Maybe there was something over here that we didn't, we weren't paying attention to. A dog walking up and down the busy street that she can see in the distance. It's not the food bowl over here, but she's aware of it. And maybe that disappeared. Context really informs whatever choices they're making. And so at some point though, we start to see after this last turnaround that she maybe is a little bit more intentional coming this direction about going just a little bit further with the human. Right here, she's not pulling ahead. She just looks at the human and she's actually keeping pace pretty well. There's an accidental treat, no big deal. But she's looking a little bit more comfortable. And then we turn away again, no big deal. We're getting a lot of attention. Humans kind of falling back into giving treats for checking in, but that's okay. It's still working out. And here again, we're seeing some really interesting choices to stop instead of continue forward, just experimenting with our behavior, which are really helpful. And in here, as the human gets more comfortable, we will start to fade out some of that accidental feeding, no big deal. Right now, just getting more aware and really empowering the dog's choice to turn around, where we saw in the last exercise that a lot of these prompts were actually missed by the human. The really great progress that we're seeing is that the human's recognizing it now every time. Every time she gets ahead, she's turning around. And so we're seeing better listening skills happen. And that's really what we're trying to develop here, is the ability to recognize what could be communication and build it into really intentional communication. And so this is really great, consistent responding from the human. And the dog is getting looser, getting more elevated because of it. Even coming this way a little bit, we see some stressiness still. We see those ears coming very straight to the side of the head, a little bit of tension through the face, some more panting, but her head is higher than it was. Before it was lowered. There was almost a little cowering coming in this direction. So even though she's still coming ahead, the level of stress experienced moving this direction seems to be lessening the more she turns. And it's not about getting ahead being a problem, because she's getting tons of treats for it and she can do it as much as she wants, but it allows for an exit strategy that maybe wasn't available before. And by having exit strategies available, we see confidence increase, even if it's just marginal little steps. And there we go again, we are moving a little bit more towards the area where she's uncomfortable. So we saw that head lower for a second, and then we see some really great attempts to turn here. Oh, it was accidentally fed, not listened to, no big deal. Here we see it. She gets just a little clearer. Now we're getting some displacement sniffing because we missed a signal, and now we're getting a little stressy about that. It happens. And so they get more obvious as we get more consistent. Then when we miss something, they tell us a little bit better, a little bit louder, because they're more certain that it should be that way, instead of kind of giving up, which can happen early on in the process. So we're seeing this dog make some really beautiful choices. And this was a nice slow walk here, and then just gets a little bit ahead. For that, she was starting to realize the food was there. I think she caught a little scent, but it was not a big deal because she got some food turning away. So we see that her body is still loose, moving much slower now. Whereas before there was a little bit of trotting happening. Now we're seeing some nice intentional eye contact there. And we're seeing her keep pace next to the human's leg. And that's not because we're trying to build a heel. It's because we're trying to make sure that when they are pushing us forward, they are doing so clearly and intentionally. So if we're ever headed towards a trigger, we have really clear ways to ask, are you sure? And we're going to talk about that more in the upcoming units. And this was nice and slow and calm. And even though she was sniffing, that's not a big deal. It's just about that anxious pulling ahead to turn around. So she got to her goal, the bowl. We're going to turn this back to normal speed. And we're going to skip ahead a little bit. They put some more in the bowl. And somewhere along here, there we go. We refill and we turn around and we're gonna go do this all over again. And we see that nice happy trotting away. We like going this direction, no big deal. Nice and loose, loose body, loose tail, nice pace. And so as soon as we start heading this direction, that's where we start to see that rushing. And we're going to talk a little bit more about rushing, but rushing and pulling to the end of the leash, I think, is a concept or a behavior that is widely misunderstood. I think we often assume that it is about a desire to get further, to keep going. And it seems to actually be quite the opposite. When we break it down and we offer these sort of clear outcome options, that they often will choose things that contradict with that a little bit. This was really nice, intentional eye contact, intentional staying in pace with the human, and really driving toward that bowl. So we see her actually we see her just choke a little on that little sitting treat she got there. Just old habits, no big deal, it happens. But even in this moment here, she has a little moment of looking right up and not trotting ahead. She's working towards that bowl, and she's figuring out with a light bulb moment that she doesn't have to go over here by the busy thing, but how to keep that human moving towards another beneficial area and how to steer, how to direct. So she got a lot of practice with turning around, which was awesome. It's not undesired. We want both options to get a lot of practice. And then when it worked for her, when it was meaningful, when she was motivated to get to that bowl, then she started showing us a different option, a different choice. And the choice is starting to contain meaning. So both options are awesome. Both are welcome. It's about us asking, which do you want? Do you want to move this way or do you want to move that way? You let me know based on these two choices that you've been given. And we're going to expand on those choices. This looks really good. Now we're seeing some happy, enthusiastic tail, even coming away from the bowl. Here we've got almost a little helicopter tail at times. We're seeing bounciness, but not getting ahead, very conscious of how we align ourselves with the human and how to get the human doing things, how to get the human to work for us. So every time right here, there was a moment of thinking about getting ahead and then instead choosing to look up and slow down and, oh wait, remember, keep walking with me, human. I'm just gonna check. Oh wait, I'm gonna smell something here. No big deal. I can stop you. Awesome, great, let's keep going, human. Wait, I wanna get the smell. Maybe it's here. Oh, it's further ahead. And so right here, she's realizing it's further ahead. This might be an accidental moment of, she pulled ahead by accident, but we wanna reinforce that you can turn me around easily by cutting me off. So we're just showing her that, we're giving her a treat. She didn't lose anything other than a couple steps and still got a bonus treat out of it and was able to come up to the bowl again. And so there will be moments where maybe you think that you are responding in a way that wasn't the intentional choice the dog was making. And that's really normal while they're learning it. But the more consistent we can be, even if we think, oh, you didn't really want to turn me around, but I'm going to show you that this does turn me around, you are solidifying that association so that your dog can utilize that to their advantage. And I know that it feels incredibly uncomfortable and incredibly strict. And so we will talk about strategies for going on your walks right now to make it a little more manageable for you. But definitely, I know that it can be very frustrating, and it's okay that there are going to be times that you will drive and your dog will not. So here we are again, super loose, great pace. And we're getting a great amount of attention here. We're seeing a little bit of trotting. It could have been that there was a noise that happened, something that said, no, maybe I don't want to go in that direction. Totally fine, whatever the motivation is. Now we're practicing our turning again, and we're seeing a little bit of that stress, and the turning seems to be helping. So again, it's not about getting to the bowl. It's about allowing them to explore each of those options and how they serve them. Both lead to treats. In this context, nothing is bad. And so again, here we start to see her making maybe some more intentional choices. Maybe we just need to observe and look around. This is a really great opportunity of just kind of listening, waiting for that next intentional choice. And it's very clear that the dog is focused on something that is not the bowl right now. And so that's not what we're working towards. Whatever we're focused on is what we're navigating in her mind right now. So that may be why we're seeing an increase in the turning rather than asking to walk. That may be why in this moment here, she was not asking to move with the eye contact because movement was not what was desired. And so communication is really contingent on what motivation exists in the moment. If I want to move, I will ask to move. But if I don't, then you're not going to see those behaviors. So it's okay. We're not going to prompt them to check in. We're not going to tell them, hey, are you ready to go? We're going to just wait until they tell us that that's what they want. And this gives a really good opportunity for her to take it all in, make a decision, and then when we do move, we move with more confidence. And so right here, we're seeing a little stressiness, right? We're seeing that ears back, we're seeing tension through the face, we're seeing some panting. And then when she wants to move, those ears came forward, that eye contact was there. Even though we're having a little sniffiness over here, I think that's just scenting the bowl. But we can be more certain that the choices that they make are intentional when we allow them to make them themselves. And we really look at how the context changes the choices. So we'll get a lot deeper into this. We will add more choices. But this is just contrasting as well the experience of trying this exercise indoors where there maybe aren't as many contextual changes or things to navigate versus outdoors, but also how two different dogs may have different needs. One may want to practice getting to the thing more and maybe more motivated to get to the bowl, and therefore practice more engagement, whereas this dog may practice getting ahead more in order to really explore turning you around and how that serves them. This is another just great opportunity. The dog gets to look around, and another example of when we're making a choice and we don't have the motivation for one outcome, we're not going to see that behavior. So we didn't see the check-in to move. I did remind the owner of that we started moving, and we saw her immediately as the movement started amp up. She spotted something in that clearing. And then as the movement started, body language became very alert, paw raised, we are concerned. And because the trigger was not coming towards us at that moment, we allowed her to look for a minute, and then the handler said, you know what, let's move away. I'm just a little nervous a reaction could happen. And look how easily she disengaged at the first prompt. And that's a reflection of when we listen more than we tell them, the times in which we have to exert our control, we get a lot more cooperation more quickly. It doesn't lead to as much frustration. And so we can manage a lot more easily when we give dogs control and agency in a lot of circumstances. That doesn't mean that they get agency in situations that could lead to something dangerous, that they could go up to a trigger, that they get to engage without limitations. But when we add those limitations, they don't have the same negative impact that they would if we didn't give them this. And so this is just kind of exploring what the dog wants to do. The dog was looking over here, but hadn't quite, here they asked to move. They start to get ahead. This is a good moment to turn around. And I know it happens very quickly, but this is sort of showing the dog how they can do these things in this context now. Right here was a moment where the human made the decision for the dog, and that's totally cool. So they start turning before the dog really gets ahead, and then we see the dog get a little aroused again because they're like, oh no, I'm going in this direction. And so then the human kind of realizes, and the dog's doing okay, but as soon as she gets ahead, we turn around. And then the dog's like, oh, phew, we're going this direction. And then the human's like, wait, no, let's go this way. So this is where sometimes our goals are in conflict. And this is that human sort of bias I talked about at the beginning of, we were working on an activity, the bull was over here. Remember, we need to start going back towards that bull, but we really didn't need to. What we were working on is listening to the dog. And right now we're seeing some alternating between that, where the dog's saying, let's not go over here. And the human's saying, but the bull's over here. And so we are seeing a little bit of conflict. And when that develops, we can see some of the stress increasing, but at the same time, we're seeing it counteracted by the couple times she gets a voice in it. And so that's something that we want to develop some awareness of. Through these exercises, we're going to learn about when our goals conflict with our dogs and what that does to our dog's emotional experience. That was a great example of the dog changing the direction. She looked up at the human and she went, well, let's go this way with her body. She just faced it in an entirely different direction. And so we're seeing some of that clear communication. We're going to talk in an upcoming unit about an exercise called follow the feet, which when we start to see this happen, the dog changes the direction of their body and we're facing a different direction. We're saying with our body, I'd like to go this way, because that's what happens. We move in the direction we face, and dogs pick up on that really easily. Of course they do. It's how they predict what we're going to do next. And so when we're facing two different directions, one of us has to acquiesce. And more often than not, that's going to be the dog. They're going to come and follow where we're going to go because we're holding the leash and we don't budge. Instead, we're going to make a habit of acquiescing. We're going to turn to face where the dog is facing and see how much that reduces conflict. So that was that acquiescence right there. Where, of course, we didn't turn and go the other direction. So they went, okay, fine, I'm ready to go that way. And that's not to say that we always have to give in, that we have to go towards busy streets or anything like that. But if we can identify those moments where we aren't aligning and we can start to diminish them, we're going to have a lot more luck when we need them to give in when we're asking. We're going to get a lot more buy-in and cooperation. And in the end, it still came together. The dog got a lot of opportunities to practice both options and explore how they might serve them. And there's still more work to be done to really refine it. But this is just another example of how the opposite side of the equation, rather than getting closer to the bull, but rather turning around and getting to explore that option, could serve the dog in a different and maybe unexpected way.